Now, one of the things that we did as an organization, obviously, we approached both the National Horse Racing Association and the Sun International, calling for them to disassociate themselves with Mr. Yoste, failing which we are going to call for a boycott. And since last year, there's been discussions as far as that is concerned, and as late as yesterday, we sort of reached a consensus or a deal in terms of how we're going to deal with this. Now, obviously, there's a number of things that, as an organization, we had to take into consideration in arriving at the decision that has been taken, which will be articulated in a moment. Safe to say that during those discussions, we believe that we found sort of a consensus in terms of the Yoste saga, because the issue here is Marcus Yoste. The issue has never been Horse Racing Association. The issue has never been Sun International. The elephant in the room has always been Yoste, and it will continue being Yoste until justice is served as far as he is concerned.
What we are against is people that utilizes the hard-earned pension fund for self-enrichment and think they can get away with it. This time, I believe that Mr. Marcus Yoste got on the horse called the GEPF, the Government Employee Pensions Fund, which belongs to the public servants. This is all about the rights and the interests of our members, and of course the public servants at large. And what we are concerned about is the lack of rebellion against people like this that abuse this kind of funds and still live the high life. So what we have achieved yesterday after discussions with the National Horse Racing Association is the fact that they should distance themselves from Marcus Yoste. We do not want organizations like that, or any organization, to be associated with people like Yoste. We are talking here about 17 billion rand of pensioners' money that people can't give account of. And we are mandate driven, and we are being given the mandate to pursue this matter of the money that has been used by people like Mr. Yoste. And we are satisfied with the guarantees that has been given to us, and Mr. Baron is here himself to confirm this, that the NHA is distancing themselves from Marcus Yoste. These horses of him is not going to run under his colors. He is not going to benefit from any of the money that has been made. We are also concerned about the 3,000 workers that works on Saturday, the grooms, the jockeys, etc. And we are happy to say that we understand that they will get their salaries, their money. They do not have to worry about their jobs and their income for Saturday. Because workers comes first to the FDUSA and the PSA camps. And that is what we want to guarantee them today.
So we are comfortable now that they are selling most of their horses. We are constantly in discussion with them. And by selling it in the market, it allows the grooms and the stable employees to remain employed. Obviously, if there should be a provisional liquidation granted on Monday, we will take action against Mayfair speculators as a board. We are meeting as a board tomorrow, where we will consider the situation once again. Furthermore, in solidarity with the movement and the thinking of the PSA, we have instructed Mayfair speculators that they will not be running in any of their own colors to just further dissociate ourselves. We will allocate colors to them, which is in racing terms called club colors, and the horses will run in club colors. Since our meeting yesterday, they're constantly selling their horses. None of them will run in the main race called the SunMet race, in any case. I'm talking about only the additional races that will take place on the day.
From the PSA's point of view, this for us is not a victory for PSA, but is victory for the country. Firstly, we are having a situation where the unions and the private sector coming together saying no to corruption, saying no to unscrupulous behavior, saying no to people like Mr. Marcus Yoste, who are basically the bloodsuckers of the working class. This is the victory for the workers in a sense that we are now saying together, we are guaranteeing the income of over 3,000 workers in that particular sector, because it will be irresponsible for any organization to say that we are going after one man and destroying the lives of 3,000 people. That is irresponsible. We cannot be party to that, even though we stand firm in our resolve to say Marcus Yoste needs to be isolated. He's an outcast. He's somebody that needs to be pushed away from civilized society, and ultimately we believe he deserves to be jailed for his conduct, because what he has done through his dealings, it has caused many hardships, and some of those hardships may not be felt today, but they will be felt in the future. And we were not prepared to extend that to these seasonal workers who are dependent on the SunMet to make a living. So in so doing, we have also agreed that we are going to have what we call a solidarity parade during the SunMet, where the PSA, the unions, FEDUSA, and those who have an interest will be parading at the SunMet with the Horse Racing Association and the Sun International, collectively declaring and isolating Mr. Yoste and saying that we don't want to be associated with unscrupulous people like himself. So
the underlying aspect that is absolutely clear, is absolutely critical, and that stands out to all of us here today, whether we are here in our private or in a public capacity, is the fact that maladministration, corruption, self-enrichment, and greed will not be tolerated. The case has been stated and the matter has been set clear. We are targeting Marcus Yoste, full stop. The proceeds and the benefits that he has derived on the backs of poor and ordinary working class public servants will no longer be tolerated. They have looted the coffers and billions have been wiped off the long and continued contributions of our public servants. FEDUSA stands steadfast here today and will continue to remain united behind the PSA and behind all of our affiliates in pursuing any form of class action or criminal charges that will be pursued against Marcus Yoste. And ultimately, when we have taken the decisions here, forgive the pun, we were not prepared to take any forms of gambles. Our members' interests comes first, full stop. And in pursuing this action, we believe that the collective interests of our members have been taken at heart by ensuring that those 3,000 jobs will be secured. Ultimately, in the pursuance of decent work and decent life for all, we will continue these discussions to ensure that collectively, as a consultation body, we take this process forward, but no further enrichment, no further stock losses, no further depreciations will be allowed. And the PSA, FEDUSA, and all our affiliated unions will continue with the fight at the end of the day.
The first thing that we wanted to highlight to everyone was the repeated misleading of investors, regulators, both in South Africa and internationally, in the financial statements of Steinhoff itself. As everybody knows, in an annual report, the CEO normally provides a report of his perspective and take on matters that have sort of affected the company during the year, the performance of the company, the health status of the company itself. And as Marcus Yoste himself has owned up, all of these seem to have been a lie. We are therefore sort of calling upon, from a professional perspective, as he's also a chartered accountant as well, your professional regulatory bodies such as your SAICA, our normal regulators like SARS and FSB, to continue with their sort of investigations regarding his professional competence, perhaps investigations regarding direct delinquency, as well as criminal liability for knowingly making false statements in these annual reports that were ultimately relied upon by the government employees pension fund to make investments into Steinhoff itself. Secondly, of concern is that none of the other directors of Steinhoff itself have accepted any form of responsibility or liability for the fraud that has taken place. Upon our review of the research report provided by the institution overseas and corroborating some of those relationships that exist, we take full cognizance of the networks and familiarities that sort of existed at Steinhoff, particularly between Steinhoff and Christoph Wieser, who was a majority shareholder, as well as their CFO, Ben Legranje. For us, it just didn't make any sense whatsoever that one who is charged with the financial matters of an institution as big as Steinhoff itself had no idea in terms of what has transpired at Steinhoff at the time. We therefore again call out investigators, PwC and OVA, to include within their investigations itself facts that will ascertain as to whether any of these directors knowingly made decisions without applying themselves as directors in terms of their fiduciary duty towards the company itself. Thirdly, what we have sort of noticed is a complete collapse of corporate governance at Steinhoff itself. Again, through the review of these networks that existed, the special relationships, the friendships, it is clear and evident to us that between the management board and the supervisory board at Steinhoff, that there were certain pockets of power within Steinhoff itself, which is again in contravention of the spirit of the King Code of Corporate Governance, which requires that a governing body sort of be constituted to ensure that there is a balance of power within a company itself. For us, it made no sense that your most significant shareholder is the chair of the board. It made no sense that a lot of the significant shareholders sit on the board itself, and therefore were able to buy companies associated with themselves to carry on these self-enriching schemes. Our final and more sort of troubling finding that we can share with you today is that Steinhoff has been on the radar of regulators since 2005 in Germany itself, when one of the associated companies were flagged for tax fraud. In our review, we decided to look at, or to zone in on their tax affairs specifically, looking at whether any relationships could be expected between the revenue that they were declaring, as well as the tax that they should have been fairly declaring to our government as well. And what we find is included in a report from the CEO is a bold and proud statement from Marcus Jooste that the group remains confident that the annual tax rate can be sustained at 15% for the short to medium term. For us, that was an immediate point of concern because the major or the big segments within which Steinhoff operate, none of their sovereign tax rates are anywhere near 15% itself. So for us, again, it's not a conclusive finding, but it's indicative of the fact that Steinhoff itself as a group was very aggressive in terms of the taxes that they provided or declared to the South African government itself. We had a look at the relationship between the tax declared and the revenues that were also declared by Steinhoff. And whilst revenues increased from year to year, the amount of tax declared within the financial statements remained somewhat flat, and again was an indicator for us to say that there are possibilities of real maladministration within their taxes themselves.